So picture this, the mighty Galactic Republic, the symbol of peace and order across thousands of worlds, is already gasping for air before Palpatine even walks into the Senate chamber. You would think this was a sudden coup, some masterstroke of evil genius. But really, it was the galaxy's longest slow-motion collapse. It is like watching a train derail in centimeters per hour while everyone on board insists everything is perfectly fine. And the Jedi, the so-called guardians of peace and justice, well, they were basically managers trying to keep a sinking ship afloat with duct tape and meditation. They had lightsabers, sure, but when it came to spotting the dark side, literally whispering in their ears, they were as blind as a bantha in a sandstorm. Imagine a council of wizards so obsessed with rules, they missed the fact that one of their own students is turning into Space Dracula right under their noses. The Senate was no better, and honestly, they might have been worse. Picture hundreds of politicians bickering over trade routes while entire planets are being invaded. It is like debating the price of lunch while your house is on fire. Some senators were brave, sure, but most of them were too busy cashing checks from corporations that already owned half the galaxy. It was corruption with a luxury tax and a round of applause. And then you have Anakin Skywalker, the supposed chosen one, who was basically a walking red flag. Nightmares, rage issues, questionable romances. And yet the Jedi handed him more responsibility than an intern running a nuclear reactor. Palpatine did not have to work very hard. All he had to do was offer a little sympathy, and suddenly Anakin is signing up for Team Sith, like it is a gym membership with no cancellation policy. By the time Order 66 rolled out, the Republic was not just dying, it was already a corpse in a fancy suit. The Jedi fell, the Senate cheered, and the galaxy slipped from democracy to dictatorship, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The crazy part is, none of this should have been a surprise, because the cracks were right there, staring us in the face from the very first prequel. In this video, we are going to dig into exactly why the Republic was doomed long before Palpatine gave his famous speech. We are going to break down the corruption, the arrogance, and the blind loyalty that turned a galactic government into a galactic joke. And we will see why the fall of the Republic was not just a tragedy. It was the overdue ending of a system that had already been dead for years. What if, by the time Anakin Skywalker was swinging his lightsaber in the Jedi Temple, the Republic had already been hollowed out like a pumpkin on Halloween? It is a curious thought, one that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about the prequels. Consider how the Senate functioned, if you can even call it that. Thousands of planets represented, endless committees, and a voting process so bogged down it made Earth's DMV look like an efficient system. The Trade Federation literally blockaded Naboo, and the Senate's response was to argue in circles until everyone needed a nap. That is not the mark of a healthy government, it is the sign of an empire in denial of its own decay. Then you have the Jedi, supposedly guardians of peace and justice, reduced to middle managers in robes. Instead of questioning why they were being turned into generals, they just shrugged and grabbed their lightsabers. They were curious about prophecies and chosen ones, but not curious enough about why their council chamber was basically a revolving door for political manipulation. Yoda sensed darkness, but his response was always another cryptic one-liner, not actual reform. And corruption was not hidden, it was in broad daylight. Senators openly bought votes, corporations controlled trade routes, and entire planets like Kamino were secretly producing clone armies without anyone batting an eye. It raises the question, how did nobody notice? Or worse, did they notice and simply not care? The Republic was acting like a body with no immune system, letting infections spread unchecked until the patient was long gone. So when Palpatine finally pulled off his grand reveal, was he really the villain who killed a thriving Republic? Or was he just the Undertaker, giving a ceremonial push to a corpse that had already been rotting? It is fascinating to dig into this because the clues were always there, hidden in the background, waiting for us to ask the right questions. Here is the part that really drives me crazy. The Republic did not collapse because Palpatine was some unbeatable chess master. It collapsed because everyone else in the galaxy was either asleep at the wheel or willfully incompetent. You watch the prequels and cannot help but shout at the screen like you are watching a horror movie victim open the wrong door. Let us start with the Senate, a collection of beings so self-absorbed they make reality show contestants look humble. Padme tries to bring up real concerns, and half the room is too busy trading favors to even listen. The banking clan is buying influence, the techno-union is carving out special deals, and senators like Orn-Free TA are literally stuffing their faces while democracy is burning down around them. If ever there was a group that deserved to be dissolved, it was this one, because while the Republic's leadership was rotten, not everyone living under it was. There were ordinary people who genuinely believed in democracy, who thought the Republic represented fairness and freedom. They were the ones who paid the price when it all came crashing down. Think of the clone troopers. Created as tools of war, never given a choice, and yet they fought with loyalty for a system that saw them as disposable. Men like Captain Rex, who wanted to serve with honor, only to be betrayed by chips in their heads, and leaders who never even saw them as fully human. It is heartbreaking when you stop and realize they were doomed the moment they were born. Then there were the senators, who actually tried. Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, Padma Amidala. They stood against corruption, they argued for peace, but their voices were drowned out by greed and fear. Padme's words on democracy, dying to thunderous applause, hit so hard because you feel her despair. She knew the republic she loved was gone, and there was nothing she could do to save it. Even the Jedi, as flawed as they were victims in their own way. Centuries of tradition had blinded them, but most were not evil. They were simply caught in a machine too large to fight, gunned down by the very soldiers they had fought beside. Scenes of Jedi falling during Order 66 are not just dramatic, they are tragic reminders of how institutions fail individuals. The sorrow of the Republic's fall lies not in its broken system, but in the innocent lives swept away with it. The regular citizens, the nameless soldiers, the hopeful leaders, they were the ones crushed beneath the weight of a government that was already collapsing. Yet, in the middle of all this destruction, you cannot help but feel a strange sense of awe, because the scale of what Palpatine pulled off is staggering. It is one thing to win an election, it is another to orchestrate a galaxy-wide war, pit both sides against each other, and come out as the undisputed ruler. Palpatine's genius was not just manipulation, it was patience. Decades of planning, grooming apprentices, undermining trust, and moving pieces into place. Watching him transform from a seemingly harmless senator from Naboo into the Emperor of the Galaxy is like seeing a magician perform a trick you cannot explain. You know you have been fooled, but you cannot help but admire the execution. And the sheer imagery of the Republic's end is cinematic brilliance. Stormtroopers marching into the Jedi Temple, the Senate chamber erupting in applause, Anakin standing silhouetted against flames on Mustafar. These are not just scenes, they are cultural landmarks burned into our collective memory. You watch them and feel the weight of history pressing down. The fall of the Republic was not the end of hope, it was the beginning of it. Because sometimes a system has to collapse before something better can rise. Out of the ashes of the old Republic came the seeds of rebellion, and that spark changed everything. Bail Organa smuggling Leia away, Obi-Wan watching over Luke, Yoda hiding on Dagobah. These were acts of faith, small lights held in the darkness. They were not fighting for the corrupt Republic that fell, they were fighting for the idea of freedom that it once stood for. That distinction matters, because it shows that hope can survive even when governments fail. The clones, too, left behind more than just war. Men like Rex and Wolf, who broke free of programming, showed that even in a galaxy of control, individuals could choose another path. Their survival is a reminder that destiny is never fully locked. That matters for the future, because hope always starts with someone saying no. And when Luke Skywalker finally ignites his father's lightsaber, it is not to restore the Senate as it was. It is to build something new. The rebellion was never about nostalgia, it was about creating a better galaxy from the lessons of the past. That is what makes Star Wars resonate. It is not just about battles, it is about the persistence of hope in impossible times. So yes, the Republic was dead long before Palpatine said the words Empire, but its death created space for new voices, new heroes, and new chances. And that is the hopeful core that keeps the story alive. At the end of the day, the fall of the Republic is both tragedy and resolution. It is tragic because billions suffered, entire worlds burned, and countless lives were lost. Yet it is also resolution because the Republic's death was inevitable. A conclusion written long before the Clone Wars ever began. The tragedy lies in the hubris, the blindness of leaders who refused to see what was happening until it was too late. The Jedi, clinging to tradition. The Senate, drowning in greed. Even the citizens, too weary or distracted to demand better. That collective failure sealed the Republic's fate before Palpatine ever struck his final blow. But the resolution is undeniable. A rotting system cannot stand forever. Palpatine may have accelerated its fall, but he did not create the cracks. He just exploited them. And in doing so, he exposed the uncomfortable truth that democracy without vigilance is just a waiting grave. Star Wars frames this collapse not as a simple victory for evil, but as a warning. That corruption left unchecked will always destroy even the most noble institutions. That blind faith in symbols is no substitute for accountability. That every republic, no matter how vast, is only as strong as the people willing to protect it. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.